Hi, my name is Alec Easthus, and as you can tell from my lab coat, my stethoscope, and my glasses that I got from a real medical institution and not from Spirit Halloween, I'm a doctor. More specifically, a psychologist, and no, you cannot ask to see my medical license because I do not have one. The brain is a peculiar beast. It's made up of many complex moving parts that can all fail at any time. I know this is a real psychologist, and I'm fear-mongering you right now. Now, the innate problem with having so many moving parts is that when one of them fails, and it inevitably will, you don't really know which part of it failed and why. If you've ever built a computer, you'll know this firsthand. This is obviously and especially detrimental when the machine that breaks is quite literally you. And there are a lot of mental illnesses that act on this exact stigma of confusion and disorder in the brain, especially when you don't know which part is damaged. Now, there's one that lies squarely above all of these in its pure lack of research and its pure, just nonsensical ways of acting. I speak, of course, of the elusive depersonalization disorder.
Depersonalization disorder is hard to quantify, as most people with it, including yours truly, have a lot of trouble summarizing its effects. So, let's lay some groundwork before we attempt to define an illness as complex as the one at hand. Depersonalization disorder is categorized as a dissociative disorder in the DSM-5, which is, in essence, a written collection of known mental illnesses and disorders used for the purpose of diagnosis and treatment, in case you weren't aware. Now, its classification as a dissociative disorder puts it alongside some real heavy hitters like dissociative identity disorder and dissociative amnesia. For these comparisons alone, we can infer that depersonalization, which I'll be referring to as DPD from now on, lies in the same boat as two disorders that are linked with disconnection and underlying trauma. More on that last part later, but patients with DPD also tend to define it as being in a dreamlike state, or being disconnected from one's body, as if being a passenger in your own life. As someone with DPD, I can completely understand what is being conveyed in those statements, but if you're watching and you don't have DPD, and statistically you don't, then how can I convey that information to you?
Man, if only there was a specific field of science dedicated to researching human behaviors and activities in the brain, and, diagnosing them using specific terminologies. Maybe then I could lay out this problem to a group of students and explain it with those terminologies, and then have them understand based on their learnings. Wait a sec!
Let's get a better grasp on the history of this illness before we start throwing terms around. Just so we can finish laying our groundwork, and also because it's a required part of the rubric, the term depersonalization disorder was first coined and used by a philosopher named Ludovic Dugas around 1898, and was described by him as a state of being in which there is the feeling or sensation that thoughts and acts elude the self. But that's some philosophical bullshit, so we'll wait to make a more concise and modern definition later. Later in the 1930s, when evolutionary biology, and by extension psychology, was all the rage, psychiatrist Wilhelm Mayer Gross, hell of a name there, would throw around those theories as a possible explanation to DPD. And finally, in recent years, it's been lumped in with the dissociative disorders. This history is quite brief, but my point in sharing is to show that, in reality, nobody really knows what the hell's going on with this illness. It's been lumped with several different explanations, and it's very hard to research or even explain. In fact, it's often believed to not even exist, as it's in the same camp as behavioral and dissociative disorders.
This is actually a major problem with a lot of psychiatric research in general, as researchers that are studying these diseases cannot themselves have the diseases, and it's very hard for patients with these diseases to cogently explain their symptoms to the researcher. Research for illnesses like borderline, depersonalization, depression, schizophrenia are often swept under the rug or ignored entirely. And as somebody whose girlfriend has borderline, I can tell you that it is real. It is absolutely real. You should be scared, and you need to listen to me when I tell you that this is real. It is real, goddammit. It's Anyway, with that established, we can finally move on to the specifics of what happens to the brain when afflicted with DPD. So let's jump in. Let's read the difference between a brain affected by DPD and a brain that is not affected by DPD. I'm going to need an assistant.
This is my girlfriend Ruby. Aw, look how cute she is. Now let's look inside her brain. Oh, sorry, let's sweep these out of the way really quick. What the fuck? In Ruby's brain, this little bundle of fear and anxiety here, the amygdala, sends information to the rest of the guys in the limbic system to let them know of perceived dangers, whether that be physical danger or emotional danger. Just look at him go. But you already knew that because you've been paying attention in class, right? Good job. I'm so proud of you. Pats you. However, if we pan over to my brain, researchers on DPD have theorized that my amygdala has either softened or entirely ceased its activity in sending information to the limbic system, so the rest of the club isn't getting those fears and danger warnings, or at least not as much as they should be. This is important in our study because one of many things that keeps us grounded in reality as humans experience in the world is our sense of fear and anxiety. As much as it might suck sometimes to not want to ask your friend to repeat whatever he said for the 4th time because, at that point, you know you've already asked too many times and you're starting to get annoying. So you just pretend you hear what he said and fake laugh and smile to go along with it, only to later realize that he was talking about putting his dog down.
It's worth pointing out that the amygdala also plays a vital role in memory. It has an important task of helping to consolidate memories in the hippocampus. It's precisely as our textbook states when it says, because of its role in processing emotional information, the amygdala is also involved in memory consolidation, the process of transferring new learning into long-term memory. So, hypothetically, if the amygdala is failing to send information to the rest of the memories in the limbic system, then you might feel disconnected from them. If it's failing to send this fear and this anxiety as established, then it's not going to make you feel like those memories happened to you since you weren't grounded in reality with fear and anxiety and everything of the sort at the time. It's also going to disconnect you from your past memories because those are going to feel like they happened to a different person, not the current you, whose amygdala is short-circuiting at the moment.
So, with all of this information put together, I think it's time that we create that definition we've been talking about, or that I've been talking about, because if you've been paying attention, you may have already kind of put together what's going on. So, I personally would describe DPD like so. Depersonalization is a disorder that causes the victim to see the world through a disconnected, apathetic state of mind, as if they were viewing someone else's life while still having direct influence on it. It would be like being a little guy with a control panel behind somebody's eye. Now, something I realized on the way home from getting pizza the other night was, wait a minute, isn't that basically what we are? I mean, think about it. What you really are, as a human, boiled down, is a spongy mass of electricity that is piloting a giant meat automaton. I mean, it's literally this death screen from Cruelty Squad. And yes, I made that description as off-putting as possible to illustrate my point. Ultimately, that's what you are. So, is DPD a hyper-awareness? Well, I thought what we've been discussing this entire time is a lack of awareness. Unfortunately, this is where a lack of research comes to finally rear its ugly head, as we don't know a lot about the neurotransmitters that DPD affects, or how it alters consciousness outside of what individual patients can just tell you about it, and you better not be looking at me for an explanation because I cannot tell you anything about that.
I'm sorry to say that there really just is not a lot that can be done to quantify the effects that this has on the brain at the moment. MRIs don't help, and this isn't a situation that can be solved by consulting the graphs. But I digress. On the subject of solving, let's talk treatment.
I have bad news for this one too. Quantifying treatments of depersonalization disorder is difficult for 2 reasons. One is it's hard to identify, whether by doctor or patient, if the treatment is effective. 2 is there are so many options, both tried and untried, that can have an effect on this illness. You see, depersonalization disorder is ultimately the result of a funny little phenomenon called CPTSD, or just regular PTSD in some cases. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder is a form of post-traumatic stress disorder characterized by a long-term exposure to the root trauma. An example would be a long-lasting domestic abuse situation. In this light, depersonalization disorder is hardly original in its purpose for affecting the mind. The brain is attempting to separate itself from the trauma and emotional turmoil that is wrought from this event. In the case of DPD, it does so via disconnection, ambivalence, apathy, or uninterestedness. And that's a real word, you can look it up. By making you a passenger in your life rather than an active participant, it helps relieve you of the wrongs that have either been put against you or that you've committed yourself.
The reason that DPD falls under the treatment theater of psychotherapy, and also the reason that its existence and treatment possibility are highly contested, as well as being the reason that you unfortunately cannot cure DPD with a Baja Blast and some Fort on a Saturday afternoon. Psychotherapy has many definitions, but as someone with DPD, the advice given to me by therapists and doctors has always been, get better. Now, it's not said exactly like that, obviously, because I'm pretty sure that's like a HIPAA violation. However, that's what it boils down to. Improve your situation, because this leads us to what DPD really is. However, if you haven't undergone full lobotomy just quite yet, then you might recognize the flaw in this issue. The thing about DPD is it acts as a shield for depression, a shield for anxiety, for schizophrenia, for whatever mental disorder you had that led to it. Because depersonalization disorder is not in itself something that you develop on your own. It's bundled with something else, usually. It's definitely a double-edged sword in this matter. Although I would say that the sword is more pointed towards you than it is your depression. It kind of gives you an outlook on life that makes it easier to navigate, to a certain extent. You see, when you live with very little fear, very little anxiety, and a whole lot of apathy, you end up just coasting through life. Yes, not particularly sad, but not particularly anything.
This also leads us into the effects that DPD can have on you as a person, whether they be short-term or long-term. I'll start with the short-term, because I know short-form content is all the rage these days. So, in order to fully explain the initial effects that come with this disorder, I want to do a little thought experiment for a second. I want you to think about waking up in the morning. You know that feeling when you're first waking up, and for just a second, you feel like you're still in your dream? Maybe you say something stupid to the person that woke you up because you thought they were a dream person. So, imagine that feeling, but then you get up out of your bed, you get ready for your day, and it's still there. I want you to imagine how you react to that. You'd freak the hell out, right? You'd panic, and you'd try to get it to go away, and you'd be running around like a little toddler and screaming and smearing your poop on the walls, so that's not fun, right? This can lead to a lot of panic and intense desperation to get rid of the effect. In many cases, it may take weeks, months, or even years to get familiar with just the effects of DPD. As for long-term effects, as you could probably guess, severe apathy or disconnection and depressive disorders go together like the United States and national debt. Another billion for the genocides, baby!
So, DPD can be a major contributing factor to growing depression and anxiety. Not only that, but from personal experience, I can tell you that after a matter of time, there are certain days where the effect is a lot stronger than other days, and it can get really disconcerting at some points. In that case, other than psychotherapy and an improvement of overall mental state, how can we medicate DPD? Good question! The issue with trying to fix DPD with chemical-based medication is that, as established earlier, we still don't have a lot of information on the specific neurotransmitters that this disease targets. So it's very difficult to design specific medications to rectify it. In light of this, and in my personal experience, some doctors have come up with the ingenious solution of throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. As a real doctor, with the real stethoscope, I can't stress enough the effectiveness of this totally amazing treatment strategy. I mean, seriously, modern medicine has advanced so much in recent years, and I'm so proud of the medical community. In my journey with DPD, I have been prescribed 5 medications, none of which have worked at all, and some of which were actively detrimental to my mental health. In their best cases, they just did nothing. Concerta for ADHD, Wellbutrin for depression, and in their worst cases, they were named Abilify.
Abilify, or aripiprazole, if you're nasty, is an antipsychotic designed to treat various behavioral disorders like BPD, schizophrenia, and depression. It is not designed to treat DPD. However, antipsychotics are a popular treatment attempt for DPD, and as much as I hated Abilify personally, I've seen mixed results on their prescriptions. In my case, Abilify made it nearly impossible to sleep for months at a time, and was seriously damaging to my well-being, given I had work and school to attend to while being on no sleep. So DPD by itself doesn't really affect your sleep schedules, however, it's important to recognize that it commonly comes in a fun little deluxe edition bundled with other illnesses. And in some cases, those illnesses might themselves prevent your sleep, or in my case, a medication prescribed to you might prevent your sleep. Lastly, before we head out, I thought it pertinent to share my personal experience with how DPD started for me.
In 2019, I was hanging out with my brother in our backyard with some of our friends when I took my first ever hit off of a dab pen. To this day, that feeling hasn't gone away. The thing is, I still hesitate to stake the definitive claim that this bum-ass weed was the cause of my disorder. Because yes, in recent years, there have been a lot of reports of marijuana-induced DPD from patients with it. However, this is just such a complicated disease with so many possible root factors that it's really impossible to tell what caused it at the time. At the time, me and my mom were in an emotionally abusive situation that we had been in for the past 4 years. And it could be that this was just a major coincidence, that it happened to develop right when I took that night. Or it could be that my brain felt that and it never wanted to leave. It could be that it was waiting for that trigger and it finally happened. Finally developed and finally disconnected. Or it could be none of the above. In fact, I could have placeboed that night and then it could have developed the next day. The thing is we don't know. In all honesty, I couldn't really tell you if that's what I was making me do. What I can tell you is to please, if I can't talk you out of doing any type of drug in the first place, is to make sure that you trust who you got it from, that you make sure it was checked, and that you are prepared to deal with the consequences of what could happen after you take it. Because some of us are still living with this. Anyways, with all that being said, I hope I've helped you get at least some kind of grasp on this needlessly complicated and not well researched at all disorder. And if I didn't, please list all the various ways you would like to see me killed. I would really appreciate it. But other than that, there's not really much to say. If you want my take on what I think is an effective treatment of depersonalization disorder, well, I don't really have anything for you. I mean, what am I? Some kind of depersonalization disorder? Seeing things through a different lens by Alex Easthouse?